March 12th, 2020. For any fan of any sport, casual or diehard, it was an unforgettable 24 hours. It was the day that nearly the entire sports world stood still. In retrospect, the real watershed moment came late the night before, on the 11th. The first shockwave came when Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert tested positive for COVID-19. Soon enough, his teammate Donovan Mitchell had it too. With that, the entire NBA season was halted. Basketball in the college ranks devolved into chaos at the same time. Fans watched helplessly during the opening night of the Big Ten men's basketball tournament as Nebraska head coach Fred Hoiberg sat on his team's bench in obvious physical distress. With 4 minutes left in the game, he went to the hospital.
Fred looks like he's a little under the weather.
After the panic in Indianapolis subsided and Hoiberg was diagnosed with nothing more than the flu, reality set in. The college basketball season was over. The next day, March Madness was no more. On the professional side, the MLB, MLS, and NHL quickly followed suit in tearing down their schedules. Down at the prep level, states across the country shut down high school spring sports, including basketball state championships. There were, however, a few exceptions.
We are very saddened that it can't go on with all the fans there, but we do realize that this is the best thing to do. So to tell you what it's going to look like at this point in time, probably premature, but as soon as we know, we'll get that out to everybody.
That was Jay Beller, Executive Director of the Nebraska School Activities Association, on the morning of March 11th, before things would unravel in college and professional basketball later that night. In his announcement, Beller echoed the uncertainty, confusion, and fear felt by people around the country as the pandemic began to escalate. But amid almost universal cancellations across the sports world, the 2020 NSAA Boys State Basketball Tournament would play on. In a country suddenly sapped of live events, small-town Nebraska kids suddenly got a strange, melancholy moment in the spotlight, even on ESPN's SportsCenter. Yes, that SportsCenter.
This is SportsCenter.
And this is crazy. Nebraska State High School playoffs, Mike, they're playing. Ron Cali out of Omaha taking on Scottsbluff's fans and family in attendance. That's it.
Nebraska's time on the big stage, though, was short-lived. The NSAA announced 2 days after the tournament that spring sports were temporarily halted. On April 2nd, they were canceled entirely. Needless to say, we've endured a lot since those early days of the pandemic. When Jay Beller announced that the Boys State Basketball Tournament was moving forward, the total COVID-19 case count in Nebraska was 5. In the entire United States, the number was shy of 2,000. As cases began to explode from this point on, decision makers had the tough task of figuring out how to safely conduct sporting events, if it was even safe at all. Throughout the spring, every sport was at a complete standstill. Eventually, though, things changed.
The Orlando bubble.
The bubble.
The NBA bubble.
The bubble.
This bubble.
The NBA bubble. A quarantined, fanless, lockdown basketball league crammed deep in the heart of Walt Disney World. Commissioner Adam Silver's leap of faith would eventually create a model for other sports to conduct their respective seasons. But that model came with mostly empty stadiums. For many, the most noticeable change in pandemic sports was the dome of silence surrounding every game. First, the players were sidelined from sports, and then longtime season ticket holders were sidelined from their familiar seat in the crowd. Now, the biggest question looms: when does it all go back to normal? One of the big news-making quotes regarding the short-term future of sports came from University of Nebraska-Lincoln President Ted Carter in a radio interview with 1400 KLIN.
I would certainly anticipate that we're going to have either very close to or full football stadiums by the fall if we can get to, immunity with, all the things that we're doing with vaccinations.
With the emergence of COVID-19 vaccines, Carter's statement is seen as realistic by some, but a bit too optimistic by others. In a public poll that we ran, 57% of voters believe the UNL president's statement would come to fruition this fall. Hardly a resounding consensus. Part of the problem in projecting fan attendance at events this fall stems from the fact that, at least in my experience, there are few people willing to go on record and make a definitive statement about what things might be like 6 months from now. Perhaps it's just widespread uncertainty, or maybe it's something else. Ted Carter's bold statement is somewhat of an anomaly. Some other athletic directors have made similar statements, while others have remained quiet. Right now, the general public is largely left to draw their own conclusions, whether those conclusions are backed by facts or just a guess. Here are some facts. The Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota estimates that roughly 70% of the country's population must be inoculated against COVID-19 in order to achieve herd immunity. This herd immunity ideal refers to the point where the virus is no longer being widely spread throughout the community. But with seemingly everything related to this pandemic, there's a caveat. A poll from Nicole Widmar, a professor at Purdue University, suggests that as many as 1/4 of American adults are hesitant or outright opposed to getting the COVID-19 vaccine. Furthermore, there is no currently approved vaccine for children 16 and under, which could add millions more unvaccinated people to that already large pool of reluctant adults. What happens if we narrow our sample down to just fully vaccinated adults? What if we had big gatherings in which everyone had already gotten their shots? CDC guidance for vaccinated people, updated on March 9th, says that we're still learning how COVID-19 vaccines will affect the spread of the virus. While the guidance says that maskless indoor gatherings among vaccinated people are safe, the CDC still advises that everyone take the same precautions in public to protect those who are not immune or may be vulnerable. For those itching to get back into the crowd, it all feels like a series of unsatisfying answers. Patience is more of a virtue than ever. We may have just gotten a small glimpse into the future, however. The Big Ten Conference instituted a policy on March 24th that allows local regulations to dictate fan attendance at sporting events. For Nebraska fans, that means limited crowd capacity in the stands for the first time in over a year. But for now, sports will inevitably proceed any way they can. That includes the recently completed 2021 NSAA Boys State Basketball Tournament. With limited fan attendance this time, it's both a reminder of how far we've come and how much work we still have to do. For Unlimited Sports, I'm Austin Kingsley.